Hello, everybody. Welcome to the School and Community Farm Stands webinar brought to you by the National School Garden Support Network, SGSO. We're very happy we have a really exciting presentation today. We're really happy that you are all here to share it with us. A few reminders before we get started. This webinar will be recorded. So if you missed something, or if you want to listen to it again, it will be recorded, archived. The URL will be sent out via email after the presentation to everybody that had registered to your email. So be on the lookout for that. We also are excited to have a little bit of a different panel, a little bit of a different webinar. It will be a panel discussion. So we depend on your participation for this to be successful. Please, as we're presenting today in the first 20 minutes, introducing ourselves, feel free to ask questions in the question bar down below on your browser. I'm going to type in a message there so you can see it pop up. And please go ahead and do that anytime throughout the webinar. And we'll look through the questions at the end, and we may select your question to ask the panelists. If we don't select your question, we will follow up with all questions within a reasonable amount of time after the webinar. So please hold tight. We will get back to you with an answer to your question. Before we get started today with our great group of panelists, I want to go ahead and just quickly go over the School Garden Support Organization Network, who we are, what we do. In 2012, it was recognized that there was a need to support school garden professionals throughout the country, people that support multiple school gardens. So this network was created. We support school garden professionals in 3 ways. The first way is through a Google group forum where people can post questions, but also research best practices based on the categories that you see there on the screen. Anybody that is an SGSO can be a part of that. The second way that we support SGSOs is through webinars like this one. We have an exciting lineup of webinars throughout the rest of the year. You can see the month in which they will be presented, and we'll follow up with exact dates as the date gets closer. And the last way that we support SGSOs is through network gatherings. The first one, there's 2 upcoming gatherings. The first one is in July, part of the American Horticultural Society Youth Garden Symposium. There'll be a pre-conference event. And then our 4th, wow, I can't believe, 4th Leadership Institute in Santa Cruz, which is a great opportunity. And the application opens on Saturday, it looks like. So that's what's coming up. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have 4 organizations presenting today, and we're going to go ahead and go through about 5 minutes each where folks will introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their organization and their program related to farm stands and community farm stands, so that you all have a little background information. And then we'll open it up for questions. So first, I'd like to introduce Mikhaela Mullins.
Great, thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Mikhaela Mullins. I'm the Director of School Garden Programs with Denver Urban Gardens, or DUG. Next slide, please. So just a quick history about DUG. Even though our name is Denver Urban Gardens, we actually work in 6 different counties. So we're not just in Denver County, we're in the whole metro area. We were established in 1985 as a nonprofit when there were some neighbors or some individuals in a neighborhood in Denver, and they all had community gardens and realized they were kind of doing the same thing. So they wanted to come together to share their resources and then to spread what they're doing to others in the metro area. So that's how Doug came about to be. Since 1985, we now have over 180 community gardens in the metro. 66 of those are located at schools, and those are what we call school-based community gardens. So that model, usually it looks like about a third of the garden space is going to be used by the school for programming, as well as an extension of the classroom. And then the other 2/3 of the garden space are going to be used by community members to rent out plots for the garden season. So we have so many gardens, lots of gardeners, and we have a lot of programs and resources in place to support our network. And one of those programs that we'll be talking about today is the Youth Farm Stand program. Next slide, please. So the Youth Farm Stand program came about in 2008, and it's a partnership between Doug and Slow Food Denver. And we do trainings for all of our local schools on how to successfully implement a Youth Farm Stand program. Our farm stand program is to serve a couple of different needs for different schools. So some schools might participate in the program to have it as a fundraiser, if that makes sense, for their community and for their schools, their students at their school. So they're selling produce for a profit. That goes back to support the school garden and programming with their garden. But more often than not, our schools who are participating in this program are participating to serve as an access point for fresh Colorado grown produce. And if that's the case, we do have EBT machines, so we can accept SNAP or food stamp benefits. Then we also partner with Live Well Colorado for the Double Up Food Bucks program. So we have a double up incentive for our SNAP participants. For every $1 that they spend on produce at a farm stand, we will match them $1 for free up to $20, which essentially that means that they could spend $20 of their SNAP benefits at our farm stands and walk away with $40 worth of produce. The produce that we have available at farm stands is coming from 2 different places. Students are growing the produce there in their school garden, and then they're often supplementing that produce with fruits and vegetables coming from local farmers. And so that's where our partnership with Slow Food Denver comes in. They have a lot of partnerships and relationships with different farmers up in the Brighton, Colorado area, which is pretty close to Denver. So we can bring in produce like sweet corn and watermelon and cantaloupe, kind of those items that have a tendency to walk away in school gardens. So we can supplement what the kids are growing in their garden with this produce coming from these farmers. Next slide, please. So all of our youth farm stands are run by a group of volunteers. Those volunteers are either teachers or parent and community volunteers who are implementing the farm stand. And really their role is the organizing side of it, and then to be a support for the students. So the students are the ones who are actually harvesting the produce, selling the produce, marketing their farm stand. They're the ones who are the face of the program. And our role as volunteers is to support those students in being successful. We do ask all of our volunteers to fill out a reporting sheet at the end of the season. So our farm stands are implemented from late August through mid-October. So I just wanted to share really quickly a couple of our metrics that we collected last year. We had 25 schools participate in the program with about 250 individual students, selling about 11,000 pounds of produce to community members throughout the metro. And in addition to the school garden produce, we sold about $5,500 of produce from those local farmers I mentioned. I also wanted to highlight that our Youth Farm Stand Toolkit, which is available on our website to download for free, and you can find the link there at the bottom of the slide. All right, thanks all.
Thank you, Mikhaela. Before we move on to our next presenter, just want to make a note that if I mentioned at the beginning that I would type in where you could write questions so you could see that. I actually cannot do that with my capacity. So please feel free to ask any questions that you can by typing in the question bar, and we'll try to get to those. Thank you. So our next presenter is David Lazere with DC Greens.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, everybody. My name is David. I'm the education coordinator with DC Greens. We are a DC-based food justice nonprofit. Our tagline is that we use the levers of food education, food access, and food policy to advance food justice in the district. On the ground, most of our programs fall into one of several buckets. So we have a few food access programs. We manage DC's Produce Plus program, so we partner with farmers markets to distribute vouchers for free produce. So DC residents who qualify or participate in food stamps or unemployment or WIC or several other social services programs in the district qualify for 2 $10 vouchers for produce every week during farmers market season. We also run a produce prescription program where we partner with health clinics in the DC area, and doctors will make prescriptions for produce and pass out vouchers that way. Another bucket that we do is school-based programs. So we have our school garden market program that I'll be talking more about in a little bit. We work with DCPS to improve school food. We help them run a school food advisory board, which is a public quarterly meeting for DCPS to collect feedback on their school meal program from parents, teachers, interested community members, students, whoever shows up. Then we also do some work around procurement with both public and charter schools. We run teacher trainings around school food, school garden, other farm to school programs. And then our last bucket is community empowerment. So we run a community advocates program where we take a cohort of DC residents who have lived experience with food injustice, whatever that looks like, and provide them with the background and the training that they need to advocate around different food issues in the district. Next slide. So our school garden market program supports schools in DC to run student-led farm stands that operate on school property. And they are run by students, but there's always an adult point person who's usually a teacher or a parent or a garden coordinator for schools that have those. We've been running since 2013. Our program is inspired by and based heavily on Denver Urban Gardens program, and it runs pretty similarly. I think one big difference is the way that we interface with different food hubs in the area to supplement schools' garden grown produce. There it is. But I'll talk about that more in a second. So the main goals for our school garden markets are to provide educational opportunities for the student and connect what they're doing in the garden or what they're doing in the classroom to selling and entrepreneurship and customer service skills and things like that. To engage community members in the school garden, just to build support for more garden programming, to create healthy food access points, to just get more fresh, local, healthy produce into DC. And then also many markets are a fundraising opportunity as well to support food education and garden programming at their schools. So to give you a little bit more of a sense of the scope of our program, in 2018, between our spring and fall seasons, we had 19 schools participating and about 100 students running markets between those schools. Our markets sold $32,000 worth of produce, which we estimate to be about 10,000 pounds. And these numbers hide a lot of variation between markets. Some of our markets are really small and might only be selling $30 or $40 a week, while other markets are big and almost take on a feel of a professional farm stand. We have some markets that are really interested in making a profit and supporting their garden through the market, whereas other markets are much more interested in just providing their students with those educational opportunities and aren't as interested in whether or not they're making a profit. They just care about getting the black. We also have some markets that'll break the mold a little bit and do different innovative models. So we have a few markets that have run CSA programs instead of running farm stands throughout the years. We have a lot of markets that will take the produce and cook things or make jams or just other value-added products to sell at the market in addition to the produce. We also work with one high school that folds their market program into a larger student entrepreneurship group. And so the students are really entirely in charge of that market, and a lot of other things. Next slide. So DC Green's role in the program, once the markets start up, they're usually pretty autonomous, pretty self-directed, but we do a lot of outreach just to make sure that schools around the city are aware of this program, because there is a lot of turnover since it is run by parents and teachers and garden coordinators. We do need to just make sure every couple of years that the word gets out there again. And then we do a lot of onboarding and training to help new markets set up. We have a handbook that we, again, based pretty heavily off of Doug's handbook, but we made some changes to make it more DC specific. Then we do trainings before each season and provide technical assistance as needed, as well as ongoing assistance for markets when they need it. Another big thing that we do is that we manage relationships with several nonprofit food hubs that work in this region to connect schools to affordable wholesale priced produce that can supplement what they're growing in their garden, because most schools aren't able, especially because in DC, the prime growing months are in the summer, so in the spring and fall, most schools aren't able to offer a complete selection of produce. So all the schools that we work with are supplementing their produce with things that they purchase. Some of them are selling a majority of purchased produce, which we also support. But the reason that we work with several different food hubs is that they all serve different purposes. So our longest partner has been the Common Market, and they are a food hub based in Philly, and they have a really big variety of produce. You can basically buy whatever you want from them, anything that's in season. But because they're based in Philly, they have a $200 order minimum delivered to DC, and so that is prohibitive for a lot of schools that aren't able to order in that volume, which is why in the last year we've started partnering with a local nonprofit, Community Food Works, who runs farmers markets in DC and works mostly with Maryland and Virginia farms, and they do not have an order minimum and are able to deliver directly to schools on the day of the market, which has allowed a lot of smaller markets in DC to run that wouldn't be able to meet the Common Markets minimum. And then just this past season, we've also started partnering with Dreaming Out Loud, which is another local nonprofit that started up a food hub that highlights local DC-based growers of color, and that's something that some schools have expressed interest in supporting, and so that's why we started to partner with them. And so we work with all of these different organizations just to make sure that the wide variety of schools that are running markets and the wide variety of markets are all able to participate. Thanks.
Great, thank you, David. That was great. Next up is Sam and Zoe from the, from Hudson Valley Seed.
Hi, I'm Sam from Hudson Valley Seed. I'm a Newburgh program manager. So I actually am an educator and a garden manager and outreach and a little bit of everything. So I teach in 2 schools in Newburgh, New York, and I manage the 6 school and community gardens that we have in Newburgh. We also do after-school programs and summer camp, so there is plenty that keeps me busy. I've been supporting what we call Crop Shop, which is our version of an after-school farm stand since the beginning. And I'll talk more about that in a few slides.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I am Hudson Valley Seed's business manager and assistant executive director. And my focus with the organization is to basically sort of keep a scope on general operations and the way that each of our branches of the organization intersect, and to make sure that we're all able to get where we need to go and the way that we need to get there. And so the other thing about me, which is something that I brought to Hudson Valley Seed, is that I was a farmers market manager in the region just before joining Hudson Valley Seed. So a particular interest of mine as a former farmers market manager and a person passionate about food access is to help our students in their efforts to feed their own communities. And that's why Crop Shops is so exciting to me. So next slide.
So we are in 4 school districts, and we put in a new garden in Kingston, New York, and we had a videographer come and make a video. So instead of hearing me talk, why don't you just watch this 1 minute and 20-second video that Sam's going to play, and instead of me reading the bullet points while the video is playing, you can just go ahead and learn a little bit more about Hudson Valley Seed. Enjoy.
Everyone has their listening ears? Yep. All right. And your listening eyes?
I always wanted a garden here. And finally now we get to have one. We're putting soil in this box so we can make flowers. It's called down. Watermelons, peaches, blueberries. I wanted the watermelon. I wanted strawberries, carrots, strawberries. Ooh, great big strawberries. Yeah. Okay.
Very gently go down into the soil and wiggle a little bit.
Great. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right.
So one of the things you noticed, the age group involved, we work with kids who are between kindergarten and 2nd grade. And we have 5 educators in our program, one of whom is Sam. So they really work with the kids in helping them to understand where their food comes from, how to make it happen. And you might have picked up in the video, one of the students asked for help. And that's something we really focus on here, is really encouraging our students to ask for help, to work together. And we find that in that garden setting, they're really able to do that. So we're sort of able to establish a kind of occupational setting for our students so they can start to imagine and envision what a life would look like beyond school setting. So next slide, please.
So when we set up the farm stand, it was sort of outside the realm of like our normal day-to-day, because we really go into classrooms and we teach these 1 hour or 45-minute sessions on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So that's really, the meat of what we do. The crop shop was sort of a way to figure out how we can kind of work within the seasons of the year, because as many of you know, if you're doing school gardening, at least for us in the Northeast, prime time is summer and the school is out of session. So we're trying to really work in the shoulder seasons, spring and fall. So crop shop was a way for us to really kind of use the produce and engage the community in the fall when, sort of counterintuitively, like the gardens are really at their best here in September and October, not really in June. So that's why we set up the farm stand. It's definitely student-led. The big objective is to get students involved. So they do run it as an after-school program. They're learning math skills, they're learning business skills. We're selling produce from the gardens. Some of our gardens are large, some of them are pretty small, so we definitely augment a lot with local farms. We partner very closely with a farm called Common Ground Farm that's right in our town, and is also a nonprofit farm. So they help us, give us produce at like wholesale cost so that we can offer things that we're not growing or not growing at the same quantity in our school gardens. And we're also trying to give the students, job training. So if you look at the pictures, you can see they love to, staff the cash register and handle the money, and they're doing math skills while they do it, as well as business skills. So we're trying to offer those opportunities kind of beyond the classroom and beyond our normal garden time educational program. And then the other goal is to really provide accessible produce to our communities. You know, like the other panelists have said, it's really about access to fresh food, and the school is a great place to do that. 2017 was our pilot year, so we started in just 2 schools, and then last year we did 4 schools, each had 2 crop shops. So this is still a very new program for us. We're excited to kind of learn from everybody actually as we go, and then we're in the planning stages right now of what crop shop is going to look like this year. We actually are very excited. We just hired a new gardener who's also going to be a crop shop coordinator, working closely with Zoe to kind of build out the crop shop in our 3rd year. Next slide, please.
So in terms of metrics, you're going to see that our metrics are significantly smaller than our panelist partners, and that has a lot to do with the fact that we're sort of in this really early stage. So basically, we live in a region where there is food access. We have food everywhere. We have markets everywhere. But what we're looking at is some unique barriers to healthy food that some of our communities where we are teaching are experiencing. So we're looking at how to make produce accessible to a community with some more unique barriers. So from our metrics, you'll see last year we procured $4,941 of produce from local farms. One of them was the one that Sam mentioned, Common Ground Farm. They're a great partner of ours. And another is a local farm called Fishkill Farms. They're a longtime family farm in the region, and they're also a great supporter of ours. So we use those farms' produce to help supplement what we provide and what the students in our school garden classrooms grow. And again, like I said, we're otherwise looking at some smaller numbers in terms of metrics. We had 11 pop-up market days last year, and that was over the month of October. 290 customers who are all very excited and wanted us to show up again and again. So that's one of the things we're trying to figure out how to make happen. And we had 84 elementary students participate, and they all really were into it. So these are some reasons that we're feeling like it's really great to participate in this panel and to learn from each of you as we're doing so. So thanks.
Great, thank you, Zoe and Sam. Next and last but not least, we have Molly, who will be sharing a little bit about Sprouts, and Lyndsey, who's not able to make it, also providing support in this webinar today. So shout out to Lyndsey and Molly, excited to hear from you.
Thanks, Sam. So Sam mentioned I'm Molly. I'm the Impact and Program Specialist with the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. So I handle our grant program, which I'll be getting to in a minute. And Lyndsey was hoping desperately to be here today, but she's actually in transit to one of our garden partners right now. So before I go too far, I wanted to explain that we're a bit different than the other panelists in that we don't actually provide direct programming, but we serve as a funding partner to nonprofit organizations and school gardens across the country. We still thought it would be important to be on the panel though, to kind of shed some insight into what we're looking for in our applicants and to give some tips on filling out those applications. So next slide, if you don't mind. So a little bit about Sprouts Farmers Market. We're a natural and organic grocery store. Currently, we have over 300 stores across 19 states, and we're based in Phoenix, Arizona. Sprouts has always been considered a neighborhood grocery store, so community involvement has always been of utmost importance to us. Last year, one of the things we're really proud of is giving back to the local food banks, especially with fresh fruits and vegetables. We gave 27 million pounds to the food banks in the states where we have stores to help increase that food access to folks who need it. Wanting to make a greater impact though, and a more consistent impact, we formed the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation in 2015 with the mission of providing fresh fruit and vegetable access and nutrition education to kids. There is a link at the bottom of this slide to a video about us if you want to learn more, but it's about 5 minutes, so you can do that later. Next slide. So what attracts us to youth farm stands? Youth farm stands are a program that we absolutely love to support, and we've been working with Denver Urban Gardens, who you heard speak earlier today. We're in our 3rd year of partnership with them and have really been inspired by their success and the overall impact they've had across their metro area and beyond. So first and foremost, what we find so special is the access to the produce that these kids have and that they can spread to their community. Just again, increasing that availability. As Sam mentioned earlier, it's a great way to reinforce skills learned in the classroom, especially math and science, when the kids are dealing with quantities and prices and transactions with the customers. Youth farm stands help build additional life skills like customer service and entrepreneurship, and they really can help build sustainability into a program when the funds from the sales are being reinvested back into the youth farm stands. Next. So finally, a little bit about our neighborhood grant program. This is our grant opportunity. The grant amounts range from $5,000 to $10,000 and are open to any nonprofit organization that operates in a state where we have stores. There's a link on this slide where you can see where all of our stores are. The deadline for the program is actually tomorrow, but that felt a little unfair to anyone who's hearing about it now. So we're extending the deadline to June 18th if you use the special link in the slide deck, and we'll also email that to you. The neighborhood grants provide direct program funding to your organization. And so a couple of tips if you're looking to fill an application out. First off, we're looking for mission alignment, so making sure what your goals are and what our goals are the same, which I'm sure they are if you're on this webinar. We're looking for a program that has proven sustainability, so we know that students year after year will be able to be impacted by the Youth Farm Stand program. And we're looking for, beyond the quantitative results, we're really looking for the human story of what these kids are learning from youth farm stands and school gardening and what they can take with them throughout the rest of their life. So if you have any questions, my email is at the bottom of the slide. Thanks.
Thank you, Molly. That was great. And all the panelists, thank you so much for introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about your program. I'm now going to share everybody's webcam, all the presenters' webcams. There we are. Now is the point in the webinar where we're going to answer folks' questions that they've asked either before the webinar through the registration. If you remember when you registered for this webinar, we asked you if you had any questions, or if folks have asked questions during the webinar that we think we can answer in this limited time. So just to get us started, wanted to ask the panelists if they could give folks on the webinar some advice on getting started with farm stands.
Sure, I can take this one. So I think one thing that I want to share is that from what I've seen, these farm stands really live or die by having a committed adult. They're a parent or a teacher or whoever else. These farm stands aren't a huge lift to run. It's really often one afternoon a week max, and then someone committed to handling the logistics of getting the materials together, corralling the students, handling payment if you're buying produce, but just having that one person who's down to make everything work is a really important first step. Another piece of advice I have is get as many people in the school on board as possible. If you can get a principal or an administrator on board, then they can make the farm stand a club, and that makes it a lot easier to get students. If you can get cafeteria staff on board, then you have a place to store produce. They might give you refrigerator space. You can get the security guard on board, then they might be able to keep the school open a little bit longer so that you can get the rush of parents coming to get after school, kids from after school programs. So just trying to get a lot of people on board. And then one other thing that I would say is just doing the on-the-ground work before you open your market to make sure your customers know about it is really crucial, because most people want to support programs like this, like having kids selling produce is generally pretty popular, and so it's just then about spreading the word and making sure everybody knows that it's happening. So this can be sending flyers home, talking to businesses in the area if you're in a more urban area. A lot of schools will even do pre-orders, so they'll go around to teachers' classrooms or get parents as they're walking out the door before the first market or before every market and ask them what they want to buy so that on the day of they already have some surefire sales. So those are a few things that I would suggest.
Great. The next question, I'm going to tweak it a little bit because I'm seeing similar questions coming in around this theme. So the question is, what are some of the challenges that you're having? And we're getting some specific challenges that have come in around policies that limit you to sell food on school property. So challenges around policy specific to selling food on property, or challenges, regulatory challenges in selling food that kids have grown. So what can you all, and if you have other challenges you want to share, that's great too, but focusing on those as well.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the policies and regulations. So here in Denver, we have the Cottage Food Act. So just knowing what your local policies are from your government, but the Cottage Food Act allows individuals to sell produce that they're growing. It can't be salsa or pickles or like zucchini bread. It just has to be whole produce. And so that's what our students are selling, is only whole produce. And then we have cooking demonstrations of the salsas or zucchini bread. And then oftentimes the kids will make the recipe cards to go along with what they're sampling for their cooking demo, to kind of tie in that piece of it. But just being aware of what your local government has as far as policy around the food is really important. We have also worked with our Department of Public Health and Environment for the state and Colorado State University and the different school districts to have food safety protocols for our school gardens. And they can use those food safety protocols for the farm stand program, garden to cafeteria, and classroom tastings as well. So we have partnered with the state and different universities and our school districts and their risk assessment teams and the legal team. So everything's above board. All of the school districts know what's happening at our farm stands.
Also to that point, on a general level, sort of more broad view, is if you look into, in terms of what local government is doing, if you look into your state's Department of Agriculture, so here it's New York State Ag and Markets. USDA will have some regulations. And then also if you look at your local farmers market coalitions, it may help give you some insight into what is and is not doable in terms of what is safe to sell. So that's another way that you can look at some resources.
So just drilling down a little bit more on this question for folks. In terms of compliance, it sounds like, Mikhaela, the way you're dealing with compliance is there's a specific legislation that allows you to serve certain types of food. So you're only serving those types of, you're only serving whole produce basically. Are other people having to deal or have different strategies for dealing with different regulatory compliance concerns from your local government?
So DC has a competitive foods law for DC public schools where you're not allowed to be serving or selling food in schools that competes with the cafeteria, which really limits the ability for schools to have things like bake sales and pizza parties. But I believe our markets also get around that because they're selling produce and they're not selling prepared foods. And we do also have markets that get around that by selling value-added samples or doing cooking demonstrations at the market.
To continue on this thread of exciting compliance, and it's exciting to me. Some more questions coming in on this thread. Just want to drill down one more layer. Do So for those of you, it sounds like most everyone, all of the panelists are selling produce from the school garden and supplementing it with some amount of produce from outside. Let me just get my question straight because they're coming in fast and furious here. Do you pay? Is the produce that comes from the farmers or from the outside, is that donated or is that purchased?
We purchase our produce at wholesale prices, and we work with the same 3 farmers every year, so we always know where the produce is coming from, and we can trace back. If anything were to ever come up, we know exactly where the produce is coming from then.
Ours are also purchased at wholesale prices, and we partner with several food hubs who act as middlemen between the school and the farmers that the food hubs work with. And we ask that all the food hubs charge schools at the end of the month so that schools have a chance to make sure that they're able to make back all of the money that they've spent before they have to give it to the school, so that they don't have to dip into PTA money or, worst case scenario, like their own personal savings. And with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions in the 2 years that I've been working on this program, all the schools we work with are always able to end up in the black before then.
And we also purchase ours for Crop Shop, and we work with the farms we mentioned earlier, who we know and have a relationship with. So I think it's really key to know the farms that you're working with. And Sam just whispered in my ear, we also purchase at wholesale prices. So we're also selling. We basically break even every year. This is, for us, the program is really about helping to expand our educational programming.
And this could be a yes or no, or quickly, is there an additional layer of compliance or regulation that's involved when you're purchasing or receiving donations from an outside source and selling it on school grounds?
Not in our case, because also we're selling whole produce.
Great. Okay, next question. Thanks for that wild ride. Next question is, can you share some your experience in incorporating SNAP into your farm stands?
Yeah, so I'll start with this one. We have always had SNAP be an incentive at our farm stands. So we started, like I mentioned, in 2008, and we had EBT machines from the very beginning. And we worked really closely, again, with the state and our state farmers market association, CFMA, and getting those EBT machines and the FNS number from the USDA. And then for the double up incentive, that actually kind of fell in our laps a little bit. So back in 2010, Kaiser Permanente and Wholesome Way were looking to pilot a double up program, and they wanted one rural and then one urban partner, and Doug became that urban partner. And so that's how we had the funds to do our double up incentive. And as those funds ended, then Live Well Colorado had received some funds from the USDA for the double up food bucks program. So Wholesome Wave ended, and then we started right away with Live Well Colorado for double up food bucks. And it's just, there's a really strong understanding in our state about the importance of food access and getting fresh fruits and vegetables out to all of our students. And so we've been really fortunate and able to offer the double up program and to accept SNAP benefits for a number of years now.
So with Hudson Valley Seed, we're operating at such a small scale that we're very much interested in discovering how we can use the SNAP system and participate in it so that we can make food even more accessible to our communities. So as we're sort of exploring those things, I don't know that we have we don't have necessarily an applicable answer as Hudson Valley Seed and how to access SNAP, but from my prior experience, I also worked with the SNAP system, and it was already in place when I became the market manager. But one thing that I know is that there's a farmers market coalition. It's a federal national level coalition, and they work closely with the USDA to set up EBT systems. At one point, that was free. You could set up for free. I don't know if that is still the case. But again, if you look into the Farmers Market Coalition, which is a national-based market coalition, they have information on their website, and they work with the USDA to set up SNAP and EBT systems. And then again, I mentioned it earlier, the local state farmers market alliances and your state Department of Ag and Markets, they all have good information, ideally, on how to set up a SNAP program. And I also, when I was researching this, I found that YouTube has a video. It looks like it's an hour-long video. It's called Operating SNAP at New York Farmers Markets. So anyone who's interested in doing research, it may not directly apply to you because it's the state of New York, but that might be a good resource to just sort of start looking.
Great. And I think along those same lines, so it sounds like some of you accept SNAP in your programs. Aside from SNAP, and Molly, I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on this since you're looking at a lot of different programs. What do you see different ways? What are ways that farm stands are engaging the community outside of SNAP? How are you engaging the community kind of outside of SNAP, but also outside of the traditional, put a note in the kid's backpack, send it home so the parents can see there's a farm stand on Friday? Are you reaching out to the broader community? If so, how are you letting them know that there are farm stands and what's available and promoting it?
I think the things that I've seen, it's kind of like everything else nowadays. It's like social media, promote it there on Instagram and Facebook if your school already has a page, or obviously more traditional methods like writing about it in the newspaper or a community bulletin board. It really is about getting the word out to get that community involvement. So I guess whatever avenue works best in your community is the best one to take, but definitely social media is a good one.
We also receive funds from our State Department of Agriculture through the Specialty Crops Grant. And so we have yard signs that we can put out in the neighborhood and give to parents to put out in their yards. Then we always hang a banner on the fence as well with the dates and the times of the farm stands. And then since our model is a school-based community garden, our community gardeners, they help us spread the word as well at the different gathering locations within their neighborhood.
We also sometimes recommend that schools run a test market if they're still on the fence about whether they want to start. And so they'll just set up, like only do market 1 week, and they'll set up their table somewhere right by the entrance to the school, so all the parents that are picking up their kids and all the teachers leaving will pass by and see that it's happening and spread the word that way.
A lot of our schools do that test market too, and they'll connect it with like a back to school night. So a night when people are already coming to the school, and then you've got your farm stand and a cooking demo and maybe some music and art projects. Like it's a really fun, high energy type of environment, and people are already there.
Do you recommend partnering with existing traditional farmers markets?
I'll jump in. None of our schools do because of the licensing that's required to sell at a farmer's market in our area. So they're all just single vendor farm stands on school property.
We also find that in some of our communities, you can set up a farmer's market and run it, but if there's not foot traffic and there's like sort of been low participation at some markets, you know, it's really figuring out how to bring the produce to the customers. So like if we know a lot of people are going to be at the school for dismissal, you know, that kind of just makes more sense for us to hold it right at the school, especially when you're involving students.
And we don't have any schools that are selling produce at farmers markets, but one of the food hubs that we work with, Community Food Works, also runs markets in DC, and the produce that the schools get is coming from those markets, and Community Food Works considers our school garden markets as extension farm stands of their farmers markets that they run. So we do work with farmers markets in that way.
It might also, thinking back to some of the schools that were having trouble figuring out how to get their produce out there if you're not allowed to sell on the school grounds, those could be good scenarios for schools partnering with local farmers markets.
What's the optimum age for students to participate in these farm stands?
I can take this one first. We have students 1st grade through 12th grade participating in our markets at different schools. I think below maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, it's going to be more run by the adult, and after that you can start giving students more and more responsibility the older they get. And in our high schools that have run markets, the students often have total or near total control of the market. So I think it does work. I've seen it work with every age. It just looks different depending on whether it's elementary, middle, or high school.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we primarily work with kindergarten, 1st and 2nd graders. But what we find is that then we have these 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that have had many years of garden education with us that then age out of the program. So we actually bring them back in and, you know, say 3, 4, and 5, like you're invited to kind of participate in this after school crop shop program. And they're already like garden experts. So it's really nice. And they are sort of excited to participate. And then we do have those older students like 4th and 5th grade that can take on that responsibility. So that's kind of our primary focus.
Yeah, we also work with kindergarten through 12th graders. A lot of schools, what they do, if they have kindergartners in the program, they'll match the kindergartner with an older student, say in like 4th or 5th grade, and those 2 students can work together during the farm stand.
Do you have to, so during a farm stand, when you have customers coming to purchase or have questions, do you have experience and advice on managing and educating the public on food associated disease risks, such as different maybe diseases that might be present in produce, and it's kind of a public health issue, or food, other health issues?
That's not something we really do. I experienced this a little bit managing a farmer's market, and there are certainly like extension sites could talk to food safety, but in terms of handling food handling and food safety and handling, most of the stuff we're working with is well, all the stuff we're working with is produce. So we'll wash the produce and we'll talk to people about washing their produce, but nothing in terms of foodborne illness or anything like that.
Great. So we have 5 minutes left, and so we'll have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Thank you to all the participants for sending in these great questions. This has been it's been really great going through these questions. The next one, and I think those last 2 are going to be indirectly related to the farm stands, but related. So first question is around the produce from the garden specifically. Do you all have experience interfacing with the cafeteria in the school and that produce going to the cafeteria versus going to the farm stand? Or does it go to the farm stand and then the leftover go to the school? Or do you have built into your programs or providing produce to the school? And just to mention to folks, the Whole Kids Foundation has a great toolkit that has information on running a Garden to Cafeteria program. So we don't need to get into the details, but I'm curious about the intersection of the farm stands and garden produce going into the cafeterias.
I could take this one to start. We work in 4 districts, and some of the districts, the garden to cafeteria program is more established than others. But for the most part, our gardens are not producing for the cafeteria. We use them during our education programs, and then during the summer we use them for summer camp, and then we donate excess produce in the summer. We do have the farm that I mentioned. They actually provide us affordable organic produce directly to the cafeteria in one school. That is actually part of a Vegetable of the Month program that we have in all of our schools, but only there is it coming directly from the farm to the cafeteria in the one school district. So primarily, our crop shops are just selling produce from the gardens directly to the customers, and then, really that's just the leftover. We're really trying to focus on just growing foods, for our garden education programs. So this year we're really focusing on growing specifically for crop shop, and that's a new sort of component of our crop shops.
Yeah, a lot of our schools will participate in both of those programs, so both Garden to Cafeteria and Youth Farm Stands. Typically, schools will do the Garden to Cafeteria on Monday or Tuesday morning, and that's just to follow along with the food safety protocols that program has. And then they're doing their farm stand on Thursday or Fridays after school. And for the schools that are more established, usually they have a section of the garden that's dedicated for Garden to Cafeteria, and then another section that's dedicated for the farm stand program, and then bringing in that supplemental produce as well.
All right, last question. Quickly, because we have 2 minutes. What tip can you provide on getting groups of students involved in the farm stand, whether it's getting the students themselves excited and engaged, or finding the right group of students to be involved, finding the right group of students to get involved?
I'll jump in on this one. One of my favorite parts of our program is most of our schools have a job application for students to participate. So they have to fill out a job application and then have a short interview with the teacher or the volunteer. And so that's kind of how we approach that, finding key students to be in that program. And that toolkit that I mentioned during my presentation, we do have a template for the job application form.
I think giving students really defined specific jobs on the market day, and then having students rotate between those jobs week to week really helps give students more of a sense of ownership over the markets and gets them really excited about doing their one job, whether that's money or advertising or counting or whatever it is.
I think another way to get kids interested in participating is to give them access to the gardens themselves, so they can really see what's happening and that they can really have a hand in producing what the overall product that's going to be sold and desired by the community.
Great. Well, we are wrapping up here, so I want to say first, thank you, Molly, Mikhaela, Zoe, Sam, and David. I've learned a lot today from you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, and good luck moving forward through the growing season this year. Successful farm stands to all of you. Special thank you to all of our attendees. We had some great questions come in. Like I mentioned before, any questions that we didn't get to, we'll follow up to you. We'll follow up on your question with an answer via email. And lastly, thank you to Tristana at Whole Kids Foundation for making this webinar possible, being the guru behind the inner workings of the webinar. So that's all. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks.